Cool.
Hello, everyone. I am so happy to being here, and thank you, Phil and Will, for inviting me. So I would like to welcome you again on my presentation, where I would like to introduce you in the server-side method of GTM and provide you with some insight how the setup works. If I may introduce myself a little bit more, I am a digital strategies architect at Architects company, which is for the Czech brand called Digitální architekti. And as already Phil mentioned, I am passionate about creating modern mouse cakes and French patisserie in my leisure time. And also I'm practicing Bikram yoga. And today what we will try to cover, we will be quickly recapping the web container setup, so we are able to compare it to the server-side GTM setup and see the difference. Then we will go on the server side and check all the components, which does it consist of, and focus on the transformations. And at the final stage, I would like to enclose my insight in logging and debugging of the setup on server side, where you can use your create error log for purchase of debugging. And as I've said before, I am passionate about creating a cake. And if I see a similarity from this forwarding web container to server-side setup, I will be enclosing also some ideas how you can understand this setup bond with the cakes. So let's get started. I guess all of you will be familiar with this famous snippet. Well, all the journey begins. It's a data layer including snippets, where a GTM JavaScript file will be downloaded to provide the logic and functionality for your GTM setup. And also a powerful object of data layer will be created where the browser can then send data which we can collect. And it's important to notice this snippet needs to be on all the pages and will be loaded on every of these pages. And on every of these pages, a new data layer object will appear. That means you won't be able to collect data from a previous page. How a data layer push could appear here is a simple example of data layer push, where which consists of data. What kind of banner did a user see while visiting your web page? And it's good to notice that once you are pushing all those data layer elements, they are appended or and creating a larger object, or even you are able to rewrite those values. So we will start our approach of creating cakes for our customers by going into a large grocery store, or maybe you will have a supplier for it, and you need to collect all the necessary supplies for creation of the cake, like milk, sugars, whipping creams, chocolate, eggs, or whatever you like. And because there will be a lot of cake to be produced, you need to wrap those at the bagging stage. So a bag or even a box will be useful for this. So you are able to reach your factory, which in fact, when we will be comparing this to forwarding from web container to server side, will be our transport bag. And I want to go into our web container GTM setup. And if we want to use a classic approach for forwarding the data via Google tag, which is in our website container, then we can include our configuration parameter server container URL and include the server-side service address. And it will forward all of our data or event tags, which we include with the same measurement ID. And instead of sending them to our GR4 property, it will send them to our server side. But as I've mentioned, here is the limitation. The data won't be sent to GR4 property, only to server side. So you can choose another option and not include it here in the configuration parameter. But you can put it inside of the GA4 event tag as an event parameter. And once it is there, it means creates the same logic. The tag will be forwarded to your server, but you can also create a GA for event tag where the parameter is not included, and it will provide a logic for you to send some data from the container, from the web container, and others forward to your server. So you can benefit from this setup. If we are going back to our idea of creating a cake, here I would like to mention that please check that you have all of your items for all of your cakes before leaving the store, because otherwise you won't get those once you start your production in your factory. The similarity here is the same with your data, because on the server doesn't know about any action of your user. He doesn't know about clicks, links visited, unless you send a request to your server-side service. So everything needs to be included in this single request. And there are maybe in your web container, when you created your tags, you were triggering on different events or different triggers for different setups for Facebook ads or Google Analytics 4. And that approach will not work here, because you want to find one trigger that will fire the request. So try to find a correct trigger which will be able to collect all your necessary data, which you will need for you to send the data you want sent from the server to the vendors, logs, or even database for further processing in the future. So if we've created this last check and we are really sure we have everything we need, we will move to our place where we can check whether our hit was sent and forwarded to server. Here you can see a menu which is usually available, and is a menu where you can select the GTM container ID, but you can switch it to a measurement ID. You filled in your Google tag for forwarding, and then you will see the hit which will be forwarded to the server, that you are sure that the container from web server did send the request. And when we are here, we are moving to our server-side GTM. First, I would like to talk about a powerful component, which is client, and we are not used to this in our web container setup. When we are speaking again about our cake approach, to our factory, we brought a big bag full of goods. And if I may add one fun fact here, I was trying to create this image with AI, and I've said, okay, I need to include all the stuff I am usually including in my cake, and I included also candles, and expected AI to include a birthday cake candles. But as you see, they are not really a birthday cake candles. But here we need to understand that when we have everything in bag, it's hard to use those goods, to be able to process those. So we need to create some sort of sorting, parsing, and put all the ingredients in the shelf and label it. And when we will be on the server side, we will need a component which will do this for us. And this is a client. This client, one of its responsibilities and function is that it parse incoming data for us and store them in an event data object, so we can benefit from using it separately in each of the components. So the client claims a request and parse the data, creates an event data object. And here you can see a short snippet from an incoming purchase request. How does it look when a GA4 client, which is provided already for you and ready just to insert it into your container, will parse the incoming request. And as you are used from web container setup, you were used to data layer variable. Here in the server container, when you want to store, for example, the language parameter, you will be provided with event data variable configuration, where you can later access the value of this variable from the input. So don't worry, we have this covered. And now I want to show you how this incoming request of purchase can look like This is a snippet which I've made from the debug view of server side. And as you see, here is a GET request, which is delivered to a gcollect page path, and includes all of the data in a string form and abbreviated form of the names of its components to make the URL address shorter, because there is some expected limit, like 2048 characters of the URL, which is acceptable. And also this GA4 event tag is taking with it all the first-party cookies which it finds in the browser. And there are multiple other useful request header which are appended. But to notice here, once it's delivered with GET request, it doesn't contain any body. This is a good approach, because when you are joining the REST API world and HTTP world, there is a recommended setup that GET is used to get some data from the endpoint, and therefore there should be address where you can get it from and not to send the data to. So that this approach was here kept, and I find it nice. And I want to show you how easy for you will be to make a easy client for GA4 for you, but a basic one, a limited one, because you can benefit from using already provided modules in server-side API. And I would like to ask Will, he promised me to include for you a link where you can find all the documentation on all the modules that are provided for you on the server side. And this simple one function call will parse all the incoming query parameters for you and create the data object for the event data. And then you just call one function which will run all the logic, run container, put there the parameter of query parameters, and then the container will start to evaluate everything what happens inside. But if you think that only this three rows of code will create all the powerful logic of GA for incoming request, you will be wrong. This shortcut will create just this kind of data, provide you with this event data. And from here, you can see how the data are transported to server. If they are originally in a string form, then the parameter itself will start with abbreviation of EP, like event parameter. And if they are with number values, they will be with starting with abbreviation EPN, like event parameters number. Also, you can see here how user data object, once you want to include some data for your enhanced conversion, will be collected. And also I want to show you how items object, one of the object you can send and let the GA4 client parse for you to server appears in the URL. Here you see that each item is inside of the object a separate item, and all of its parameters are then separated with tilde to provide the logic that it's easily parsed on the server side. And also here in the tag are also the constant populated. I wanted to show you that if you include too many items in your order, like for many cakes, the request will change into post form, and there will include the body as well, where it will include many of your items. So also this logic is already solved and provided for you, not to create too long request URL. And okay, let's make one thing clear. When a request reaches a server, there are only two possibilities. No client claims the request because there is no which is capable of, or a single client claims it. You will get the possibility to include multiple versions of client. For example, one can accept data from in a measurement protocol form from backend, or even from the web container, which will be developed via fetch function, or it could be a great tool, the Stape client, which is developed by company Stape, and the data tag will send it for you from the web container to server. But when the request reaches the server, only one, if any, is capable of claiming the request will make it. So what are the client's main responsibilities? He needs to recognize and detect if the request is for him. That means he checks the page path it is delivered to, maybe check again some value in their query parameters, whether is it for it. And of course, it can check whether does it contain some content in its body. Then it comes to the important point, let's claim the request. And the one which calls this function, claim the request, will have it. If you, I will talk about it on the next slide, but if there will be two clients with the same logic, but the first will try to recognize or detect the data, and the other will just write a claim of the request, claim request function, the second will win because it will reach the claim request quickly. So for that reason, we will need to set up a priority and help this to be solved to allow, for example, our custom client to be prioritized and allowed to claim the request against another one. Then it should parse the incoming data, as I've showed you in the previous slide, store them into the event data object, and this event data object should be parsed in the incoming as a parameter of run container function. He is capable of accept many different data from the container if they are delivered by tags. It could be messages, it could be cookies, it could be some pixels, and it could be even pixels which should be delivered back to browser. Also, it's possible to ask for event callback, as maybe you know already from the web container setup, which will give you back all the tags that fires with their IDs or newly with metadata with their names. Then the firing status of whether they were successful or not, and the execution time. So you can get this data for debugging purposes in the client. And he is responsible for returning the response back to its origin or even the browser. The client templates has the possibility of including some input variables on the input. They could be constants, like example, if you want to include whether it should be debugged or not, or you need to know that you cannot input here the event data variables because they are not created yet. You are trying to produce them, the event data object. Even if you try to get those inside of the run container snippet, you won't be able to reach them. And when it's over, the event object doesn't exist. But as I've said, you can send and deliver those event data values with tags, and I will show you how later. The tags can deliver those values for you if you need them in the client to send them back to response. And there is also some limited support of variable types which doesn't depend on the event data. So, as I've mentioned before, if you have two clients and you want to give time to for one client to detect whether the request is for him, you can set up the priority and higher the priority, the code of this client will start to trying to claim the request. When you start the setup on the server side, maybe you will get a 400 batch request response, and this could be because there is no client that was accepting the request, either because there was no client installed, or it could be because you send it to an address no client is listening to. So you get a response 400 batch request. And now we are on the server side, and I really want to show you how this logic works. So we are having incoming request in the client, and here, in case we really want here in the client, We can enrich the data with some HTTP request, or even we can access Firestore of our service to provide more data for our event data object. Then we are creating our event data, taking all the necessary data from the incoming request into the container. And there will be many tags, and some of them will be triggered on this event, which all of the events incoming requests will create an event name, so you can trigger those tags to this event name. One tag will be starting their evaluation, and what happens then, he is able to take and collect data from even the data object, but also from variables. And also here at the point from variables, you are able to reach new and enrich the data from HTTP endpoints or from the Firestore to get, for example, some purchase prices of your items to calculate a margin on server side, or lifetime value, where you can then put it for enhanced e-commerce evaluation in ads. And once the tag is done with collection, it will be fired, and it can be delivered to BigQuery for further processing and data reporting, or even storage. It could deliver some logs to your Logs Explorer, or to all of the types of vendors you want the data to send to, and which provides the API endpoints, so you are able to send requests to their endpoints. And as I've mentioned, there are possibilities for you to send some of the data back to client. Let's make this logic start again. We are having the client, which has limited access to some sort of variables on the server side. And we will complicate the situation right now because we want the tag to use the logic of transformation, the benefit from the transformation function. That means that if to a transformation a tag is attached, or the tag type is attached, then we need to change the event data object, update it. We can just exclude some of the parameters which are inside. We can just say and allow only a selection of the parameters to be accessible from the tag scope, or even we can calculate and create something in variables and give it an event data object name, store it in the event object so it can be accessed from the tag from this name. And once this is done, then the logic starts again. Tags can request some data of the transformation and even from variables. Just here to differentiate between variables and event data. Here the variables that will be directly accessed, not from the event data object, will have already on input transformed event data values. And then it goes as on previous slide, you send it further or even back to client, and response will be delivered back to its origin. Okay, I want to talk about another very, very powerful client, which is capable of serving the Google scripts of your container from your domain. That creates the first party context, is capable of getting some more data for you because the blockers in the browser wouldn't detect it. It wouldn't be delivered to Google addresses. And what you need to do is include your web container ID and also check this option that you want to automatically serve those scripts for your web pages. I need to say here is that you will be need to pay because for the transport of the JavaScript files that needs to be delivered on every page. So you need to decide whether this is worth for you, but it will create for you the option also to store the cookies back to browser in first party context. And for this to work, you will need to create a domain mapping on your server side, Cloud Run service. You can do it by selecting a Manage Custom Domain option. And if you are an owner of your Search Console profile for your domain, then this will work very quickly for you. You will add mapping for your tagging service, not for debug or preview service. And then you just include some DNS records for your server. And in a few hours, it will start working for you. So you can include a new snippet in your new address into your Google Tag Manager snippet. And what I wanted to say is be mindful while choosing a region of your Cloud Run service, because not all of the region provides this custom domain mapping. The others have the capability to provide you with load balancing service, but this is more difficult, and also it costs you a little bit more. So here at the end, you are able to provide the snippet with a new address, and from that point, the data will be downloaded from your domain. Okay, we've covered lots of things to cover in the first section. Now we will move to variables. When we are talking about our cakes, we need to produce many components, and one of my favorite and really tasteful, and you can do it by yourself at home if you want to. It's a chocolate ganache made from whipped cream, vanilla, some gelatin, which is previously hydrated in cold water, some chocolate, and here as input parameter, I am also provided a variable color of the chocolate. Here I've included the recipe and the process, which I won't be covering right now. And the final product which we will deliver from our variable will be the ganache. And because I can benefit from having multiple instances of the variables from this template, I can create white chocolate ganache, dark chocolate ganache, and even milk chocolate ganache. And if you are passionate about the ruby color, there is also a ruby delicious chocolate around. So what are the custom variable templates used for? The thing on the server, once you move it, is you will realize there are no custom JavaScript variables there, because there is no browser where you can inject the script and let the code evaluate it. But you will have the powerful option to create your own custom variables. They will provide you with the possibility of creating calculation, changing of data types and form, and even a structure of the data to which expect text to be delivered. You can make the queries asynchronous queries, and luckily that already the promises are there, so the container waits until the queries receive their response before the other variables fire their logic. You can also use it for putting some elements together and preparing your output. And here you can, as usual, use input variables of constant, even data, either usual or if the tag is transferred, the transformed one. And you can use also other variables on input. All of the custom variable templates are expected to return some value. And here I want to show you what kind of variables is provided for you on the server side right now. I am mostly using those for utilities, the client name and even name, mostly for triggering those tags. Constant, you can write up any value in a string form and send it further, and we will use it in our logging setup. And also the event data variable, as I've mentioned before, to store our incoming data and use it for our logic. You will also have the possibility of including your custom templates and deliver those for the variable scope. And here are some more which are able to store the values about the request or even about the container itself. Let's read the transformation. I've tried to cover it already in the previous slide, but if we are reaching our approach with cakes, maybe you are allergic also to milk protein, and you won't be sure that in your cake there won't be any milk. So you can benefit from using a transformation exclude. Let's exclude the milk so we are 100% sure that our cake won't have the milk. And this is the approach of the transformation exclude parameters. And here to notify that how it goes it puts into this variable the undefined value. Here is one example how I can use it. If I'm delivering some enhanced conversion to my server side, and I want only ads to have access to it, but protect that Facebook doesn't have anything from that, I can exclude parameter of user data and say that the affected tags will be all of the Facebook group. And then I can be sure that no one gets those data from the Facebook's tags scope. The other option and transformation we have is allow. If we want to create a low on budget cake because our customer is low on budget and we want to create it from cheap components, we will select those cheap components to assemble a really basic cake that can be delivered. And for this, we are selecting an allow parameters option, and we selected just a few parameters from the event data object. If I am speaking about the data here, we can benefit from using it if we deliver, for example, for some tag which is populating all the whole object of event data to create a log or send the data back to the client. And you select those which are important to you. Say it will be created this logic for your logger on the output, and the logger will be able to populate only those from the tag's scope. The third one, and also a powerful one, is augment event transformation. And here we are having event data. And if our customer wanted a wonderful cake to be delivered with some car chocolate decoration on it, we can simply update some of our value from event data here, the chocolate with the chocolate deco, or we can add new values to even the data from some calculations and for some components of the cake. They will become a part of even data, like fruit insert, sponge, some mouse or cream or any glaze for decoration can appear there. When we are speaking about data, here I've shown you one example of transformation augment event, where we were receiving some of the orders in euro currency and some of them in Czech crowns. And our customer wanted us to provide all the data in Czech crowns, even the calculation of margin before being forwarded to ads. And so we've created this augment event transformation, and we've included all the converted numbers even in the item scope, that they will be interpreted correctly and delivered to ads. And always you will select the tags the transformation should be delivered to or applied to. You can either include some tag types or include exactly one tag which you want to include, or you can exclude. That means that the logic will be provided for the rest of your container. And you are having some incoming data, but if you are delivering your cakes, you don't want your customer to be delivered with eggs, but maybe you want them to have pavlova, which are created from the eggs. For this purpose, we are having also a priority on our transformation, and higher number we set, those transformation will fire. So if we are having the case and approach that for ads, we want to include a margin instead of value, and we want the value parameter to be protected for reaching this tag, we need to set up a logic that first the margin will be calculated, because in the calculation, there is the value as a number, which needs to be for the logic or for the calculation included. We are having the higher priority, so we fire this first. And then the second transformation will appear and exclude this parameter. So the value will become undefined. So you can set it up like this. That's everything I have about transformation. And let's move to the last part, to our tags. There we will be assembling our cake from the components previously created in variables and added to our event data object. And we will wrap it in a box so we can deliver it further. When we are speaking about the tags, we can collect all the data, wrap it for forwarding purposes. We can even deliver some of the data back to our client, as I've mentioned before. And the input variables are, as always, constants, even data, and variables. But in matter of variables, I would like to mention that there could be a difference. If you add for transformation the variable into the event data object, it will be calculated from non-transformed event data, or if we are talking about one transformation appearing there. But if you then access the tag to the variable, this variable has some event data on its input. These values of event data will be already transformed. So this logic can produce different values, no matter in the data margin you previously stored to your event data object, the new calculated margin value. And also another thing to notice, that for purpose of applying the transformation, all of the variables included there will be evaluated. So if you use many transformation, lots of variables will be re-evaluated. And if you then access, for example, Firestore, you will pay for the transporting cost and even for the request. So be mindful and don't create too many transformation in your container. And I wanted to show you some examples of code for your custom tag templates. Here is one which will be capable of sending the messages back to client. And it works with a component module called send a message. You will give it a name, and then you can include, for example, a JSON body, where you include all the parameters that can be populated here. This tag template collects the margin as input value. And it also includes a body message for the response to be sent back to browser. All the tags should have the data GTM on success at the end of this, when the tag was fired successfully, for you to see in the debug view that the logic worked correctly. But because if we wait in the client for some response and there is some error, no response will reach it, and this will cause trouble. So if this is set up for you, please include also a message which doesn't contain margin, sends, and some error status and claims that there was no margin for the client to be able to give the response back. And you set up the data GTM on failure in debug view, then we'll see that the tag didn't fire, it failed. And on the client template, custom client template, you will then enclose after the claim request the add message listener, which will be able to collect the send margin message. And you can then simply include the status, which will be then converted to number. The message itself will be stringified in case it is not in string form. And then also a cookie value will be sent back to your browser, which is the only approach I found once you are using a GA4 client to return your data back to browser to access those from your GTM setup, because you are not able to reach the point where the GA4 event tag request was made and sent its response to. And don't forget to include the run container function, because if you don't run container, don't include the event data, no tag will deliver your message back. And here is another custom template for the cookie delivery. But if you have been to the server-side setup, you should know that there is already in template gallery a powerful solution for you created by Simo Ahava and Cookie Monster tag. But if you want to write it yourself, there is a simple logic. Just you need to pay attention that the value itself will be in a string form. And if you want to reach the cookie values from your container, the HTTP only value should be set to false. And as I was trying to set up some logic of input cookie value. If it's a string, I will input and set the cookie. But if it's not a string, this is an error, and I want to log that the input cookie value is not a string. And now I'm reaching the final topic, which I want to show you because I'm a programmer and logging and debugging is really important to me to know what is happening in the container while I am not sitting there and you don't have the insight about the things which doesn't reach the endpoint from your server. Sometimes happens that the things didn't go well as you expected, even with transportation of your cake. So you can benefit of using a log to console module inside your server-side setup. And then you can use the logic of including some errors message inside. If you include this model in your template, you should check definitely the permission tab of the custom template, because there will be two options from which you should select. To include the log and collect the log only while you are debugging or previewing, or log always. Keep all the logs for all the incoming data, even on while they are on production and you are not sitting in the server. And from my programmer's approach, I am used to choose output streams, which are std_out, standard output, and std_error, which is errorless output. But I didn't find a solution from the server side to reach the standard error output. So for me, when I am using the log to console, I know it is bound to standard output. This function expects the string, but if you include any other type as a parameter, it will try to convert it to string before being sent further to your Logs Explorer. And here I am having a snippet of Logs Explorer. Phil, please, 2 more minutes if I can. Here you can select the option of show query and say in the text payload, please include all the messages that have inside an error in the message. And here you see there are some error which appeared on the server. And here, for example, a template wanted to convert string to number, but was receiving an input string value of B, which you cannot convert to number. So the error appeared here. And you can even create an alert, which will notify once error appeared in your container to deliver this message to your Slack, to your email, or PubSub, or whatever you are using. There are really many choices for you. And I wanted to show you how this standard output log from the container looks like. It's really text payload, and you can only use the string form for it. That's the reason why the query looks like this. And we've reached the important logic for me to be able to create the only error output. Whenever I'm using some custom template, I'm enclosing a debug variable, and I can put there a true if I want to enclose all the standard output logs as well as errorless log, or false for turning off the standard output to only deliver those logs which are errorless. And if my implementation are becoming large, I'm benefiting from using a constant which has the true or false value at one place, and I can turn this switch from one place for the whole container setup. So, and even when I'm writing those variables, I am benefiting from including the default value of the name of the variable. So every time I'm creating a variable or tag from it, I don't need to include this. And here is the last step, our last snippet, where I am creating for you and showing you how to use this log. I am here selecting the debug because I'm included it in the input parameter, and it will be in form of a string, not Boolean, that if it's true, just simply return true in Boolean or false. And I am having here 3 logs, which are the standard ones. What happens inside of container to know while I'm debugging. And here I wanted to access Firestore. And because we had many transformation in the container, there were multiple requests to the Firestore for the same value. For that, I was trying to implement a caching inside the template data storage, and I wanted to know how many times was this variable fired that needed the request to be made to the Firestore and pay for the transport as well as the request, and how many it was just included from already returned value and stored in the cache. And this solution provided that information for me. And here is the last log, which will be included if you select the option of always log and set the parameters to true or false. Whatever option in the debug is, this will be included. So you will get an error. I am also included the name of the template, not of the variable, the template, to know which code I need to debug, and that was Firestore query, and that it didn't receive a response. There was some problem. And for that, I am including also the query. So for me, there will be a really quick solution. I know the query. I can really quickly debug what's happening inside of my container. So hope this setup will work also for you, and you can benefit from using it, because you will then have, once you turn the option of the constant to false, only those errors messages. And even if you include you want to include another logs of warning, which are not so important, not so critical, you can set it up and write just warning at the beginning, and don't create alerts in the log just to appear there. So I promised you assembled cake at the very last slide. So this was my last cake. I produced a bunny with a bubble for my birthday, full of apricots, and it burned me in the winter mood. I want to thank you for being part into my presentation. I want to also thank to my colleagues and powerful team from Architects Company, which are pushing me forward. Want to thanks also to Phil and Vel for including me today, and hope you you get some points from me so we have more people which are turning into implementation on server-side GTM. And we wanted to offer you something in case you are in troubles, you are looking for some check of your implementation and want some help. We want to offer you some audit of your current measurement setup or some free consultation. So if you fill our form on this address or reaching this webpage from our QR code, the 51st fill form with coupon GTM forward will get this service for free from us in the early month of 2024, and we will be looking forward to answer your questions or cooperate.